Joining us now in studio is Peter Schweizer, president of Government Accountability Institute and author of the brand new book, Blood Money, where he details the Chinese Communist Party's covert operations in the American drug trade, social justice movement, and the medical establishment to sow chaos and decadence in the United States. Peter, thanks so much for stopping by. I really appreciate it.
Great to be here, Ben. Thanks.
So let's start with the why. What is the goal of the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, they have a strategy. It's called disintegration warfare. And what the name implies, it is to disintegrate the United States. The idea is, why fight a kinetic war, have casualties on both sides? Why not undermine the United States through a series of actions to encourage the dissolution of America? So this is real. This is not make-believe. It's an actual doctrine. And President Xi has embraced it.
So let's talk about how they accomplish all of this. There are a bunch of tentacles here that you talk about in Blood Money. Why don't we first start with sort of the hot topic of the day, which is TikTok.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is now creating fissures inside the Republican Party because some members of the Republican Party, including President Trump, have said they don't want TikTok banned. And then you have other members of the Republican Party, people like Representative Mike Gallagher, for example, who's on the China subcommittee, who's been talking about how he wants TikTok banned. I personally am very much in favor of TikTok being banned unless they're separated off from ByteDance, which is their Chinese owner. What is China doing with TikTok?
Yeah, here's the bottom line. We're having this debate in this country. Is TikTok a threat? Is it not? There's no debate in China. One of the things I do in the book is I quote extensively from CCP officials in the Ministry of Propaganda. They view this, in their words, as a Trojan horse that they're using against the West. They talk about in detail how they use it to change the views and attitudes and belief systems of young people in the West by appealing to emotion, giving a young person a sense of quote-unquote righteous indignation. Once they embrace that, they now can manipulate the way that they see the world. So they're quite explicit about what the goals are here and what they're actually using it for. And the notion that ByteDance is just kind of a Chinese company that happens to be in a communist country is ridiculous. This is the same company that is doing joint research on how to manipulate people online with the Chinese Ministry of State Security. It does not get any closer or more clear-cut than that.
So let's talk about how you got a hold of all these documents. You have all sorts of material in the book that people don't know about, and a lot of it is from internal Communist Party documents and sources inside China. How did you get a hold of that stuff?
Yeah, so we had a couple of researchers that obviously speak Mandarin. We were able to access some documents in China that requires to have a landline, an officially recognized landline in China to access those documents. Let's just say there was a way to spoof that. So we were given access. These are not, top secret documents in China, but these are internal communications, military journals, for example, Ministry of Propaganda, internal documents discussing their social media propaganda outlets and how they use them, how they use TikTok, how they interact with Hollywood, et cetera. And it's very enlightening because, again, while we kind of speculate and wonder, I actually let them speak for themselves in the book, and I think that's the most powerful part of that section.
So how does this manifest in terms of, say, the 2024 election? Because you say that China is trying to sow seeds of chaos, that they're trying to create dissolution.
Yeah.
Does that mean that they're siding with one candidate over another, or is it more just they don't care who wins so long as they continue to sow chaos?
Well, they like chaos, but obviously their clear preference is Joe Biden. And the reason is, if you look at any issue, Joe Biden has been very, very soft on China. You look at the issue of fentanyl poisoning. A lot of people think that it's kind of the Mexican cartels that are doing this. It's not. It is a Chinese operation. They are the senior partners. The drug cartels are the junior partners. Joe Biden will not confront China about this. And the question is why? As I point out in the book, Joe Biden's family in 2017 received a $5 million forgivable interest-free loan from a Chinese businessman. That businessman happened to be the business partner of a criminal gang leader in UBG that set up the Sinaloa cartel in the fentanyl trade in Mexico. So you literally have 1 degree of separation between the Biden family's financial interests and the fentanyl trade. These are the kind of entanglements they like, and they clearly prefer Joe Biden. There are things they like about Trump, but they like Joe Biden a whole lot better.
So that raises the question of Hunter Biden. So the Democrats have claimed that Hunter Biden should be off the table. He was just a sort of off-the-road, troubled youth, despite the fact that he's in his mid-50s at this point. But in your book, you make the case that there's something far more nefarious going on with Hunter Biden and the Chinese.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way that the Bidens have structured their business is classic corruption for third world countries. It's very, very rare that the African leader, for example, or the Latin American leader takes the money themselves. It's usually a family member, and that's how the Bidens have operated. All you have to do is look at who, for example, in China has sent these tens of millions of dollars to the Biden family. Nobody disputes that the money flowed there. The question is, who did it come from and why? Who did it come from? The three businessmen that sent the bulk of the money to the Bidens all have ties either to Chinese organized crime or they are linked to the Chinese intelligence service. And there's no discernible evidence that the Bidens did anything of professional business value in return for that money. So why did the money continue to flow? And I believe it is a classic example of influence, gaining influence through a family, indirectly through a family member. It's one of the oldest playbooks in the developing world.
So how should people in the United States view the fight against China and China's intentions here? So obviously one thing would be to build up internal solidarity. That seems to be more and more difficult these days, especially because China is pushing on all of the rifts in American society. And again, that's nothing new. I mean, if you go all the way back to the Vietnam War, that's precisely what the North Vietnamese were doing. I mean, the entire Vietnam strategy was just make this war last longer, and eventually the American people will break themselves apart and will win, which is, of course, precisely what happened. China seems to be pursuing that writ large, as you talk about in Blood Money. But what sort of hard strategy should the American government be pursuing with regard to China right now?
No, that's a great question. I mean, the first thing is we need to have awareness of what's going on. Look, I think we need to have aircraft carriers. We need to have missiles. But that's not the war that China is fighting right now and that wants and is convinced that it can defeat the United States with. So we have to start paying attention to these issues. We have to deal with Chinese political influence in Washington. We talked about the Bidens, for example, but you now have more than 24 lobbyists working for TikTok. That includes half a dozen former U.S. senators. That includes senior campaign officials for both the Trump campaign and Barack Obama and Joe Biden's campaigns. The bottom line is this political influence game has to end. The notion that Chinese state-owned companies or Chinese state-linked companies somehow have a constitutional right to lobby our policymakers is ridiculous. So I think we have to begin by first recognizing what's going on. The second thing is we have to ban this influence game that we allow China to play in Washington, D.C. Until we do that, we're going to be fighting this uphill battle because they are just throwing so much money into that town.
And given what you know about sort of the long-term Chinese strategy, I know a lot of people, including me, have been concerned about the possibility of a Chinese blockade of Taiwan, given the fact that they have real problems demographically, they have serious economic problems on the horizon, and the fact that they see weakness in Washington. What do you think is the possibility that they make some sort of military move on Taiwan? Probably not an invasion, but a blockade.
No, it's a great question. I think it's certainly a possibility. We have to look at it seriously. We have to stand tough. I do think that their strategy there, though, remains similar to the United States. I think they believe that they can actually come to take over Taiwan without actually going to war. If you look at the recent elections that were held there, the party that is pro-Beijing only lost the elections by 3 or 4 percentage points. It was very, very close, and that is probably going to tighten going forward. So I don't anticipate a kinetic war only if they actually absolutely have to. They feel like they don't have another option. But I do think they are confident that they are ultimately going to gain the upper hand in terms of the influence game.
Well, folks, go pick up a copy of Blood Money. It's a fantastic book. It's at the top of the New York Times bestseller list. They somehow missed it when they were banning books. But Peter is doing an amazing job. He also has a podcast that you should check out called The Drill Down, where he goes in depth on all of these topics. Peter, thanks so much for stopping by.
Great to be here. Thanks, Ben.